Hi, welcome back. This will be part 2 of our tour of using AutoCAD to make some Auro designs. Previously we went over the site survey and the elements that are kind of in here that we'll be working with. I'd also like to mention that I use a quick template to get things going when I start doing my drawings. I generally receive the different drawings from the architects, and I'll take the elements out that I need and put them here in my own model. Of course, you guys will all have your own standards for how to do that, so of course adapt that as necessary, but just to explain, I do most of my stuff here in model space, and then I just have a quick little sheet border that I put together for printing it out and distributing it as a PDF. So to begin, we'll go ahead and start right here on our cross-section view. One of the most important aspects of where we want to start is the reference listening position. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these annotations here because we won't need those quite so much. So the ideal reference listening position is going to be 2/3 back, the distance between the screen and the back row. And then it's also in the center line of the auditorium. So that's where we're going to be creating all of our angles and various computations on where the speakers need to be placed. So I've got a quick little macro here that basically just helps me draw a line and gets me back to dividing it into thirds and moving it out of the way down here so that I can get that set up. So I've got little nodes that it puts on there from doing a divide command, because I do this all the time and that was repetitive, so I made a macro for it. So then we're going to go from our X position of this node, and it looks like it's falling on this level of risers. So this will be where our reference listening position is in the auditorium. So lots of the angles and whatnot you're going to see are going to reference that. So from the side we can see our stage speaker separation. So I've got a action block there, so I just drop that on the top of my little listening position, and we're going to need some speakers. So put this guy in here and move him back 6 inches from the screen. So I've got 6. Alright, so pretty tight quarters behind the screen as usual, but that's pretty typical. So this would actually end up being our right speaker. So of course you'll use your own layers for your designs, but I've used the AI layering scheme and have some equipment speakers and R for right channel. So that will drop that in there, and as you can see that's really quite high. So typically we would recommend moving that speaker down some. So we'll lower that so that the center is, probably not much more than about 3/8 below there, below the center, or 3/8 the height of the screen. So this action block for my stage speaker separation has a handle to do some rotation on it so that I can point it at the center of my main horn here. And then it's got another handle that's going to alter the length of those extension lines for reference. So we'll shorten that up here to that same spot. So the Auro design specification really wants us to have a minimum of 15 degrees separation between the discernible, acoustic center of the speakers. And of course, we'd always like 20 to 30 degrees as our ideal. Typically those are going to be difficult to get to, but we've got this last handle on here so that we can kind of see what we're actually achieving. So if we make a copy of this little platform here and move it up so that the top of this speaker is at the top of our screen. So we've got clearance here so that we can have our distinct rows, and then we'll grab our other actual dimension line here and drop it at that same point. So we're getting about 12 degrees in this particular situation, which is less than we'd like, but it's going to be all that we can really achieve here because of the shape of this screen. So I do have a handful of speaker blocks that I've also made some actions in. It's always important to aim the speakers. So I've made this one here, and we want to aim all those speakers. Every time, your general aiming requirement is you want to position that speaker so that it's pointing at the seats that are 2/3 away from the wall that it's on. So that'll apply to our side speakers, and when we drop our rear surround speaker in here, we want it to point at the position 2/3 out here. So we'll have a little representation of where a listener would be at 2/3 away from this wall, and that'll be the direction that speaker aims. So we'll also aim our lower row speaker right at our guy here. So these JBL 5742s, they actually have steps of 5 degrees, so I've limited the block to actually aim those in steps of 5 degrees. So you can see this lower speaker is actually the top portion is tilted back, and that's because the normal angle of those aims down about 15 degrees. So we're not aiming down quite that much, so we're going to tilt that back a little bit to shoot that sound straight at those at that reference listening position, which is 2/3 back from that wall. So that pretty much covers our separation calculations and where to put those screen speakers. There'll be some clients that don't want to relocate these, and these will overlap a little bit, and you'll see that this number can sometimes be quite low. It's not ideal, but having those speakers present, of course, is going to be our biggest need. We do also have the option, if your ceiling is higher, you could put the speakers above the screen as long as whatever masking material there allows the sound to go through unobstructed. So that pretty much covers our front speakers there. So the other one that I put in here is I'll drop a listening position, like I was saying, for our rear speakers at this node and at that height so that he's on the floor. So I've got an action block for the reference listening position. I just drop that out here on the floor of that position, and that's just so that we can call out that, of course, this is 2/3, and then I've got some little spacing blocks that I use to make sure that all my dimensions are evenly spaced from the drawing, just to kind of make things pretty. Where I learned to AutoCAD, that was something that they did just to make sure that everything was consistent and had some nice flow to the dimensioning. So that's our 2/3 back for that side, and so those handles are just to position the ends of those. It's interesting, that one gets moved oddly. I will look into that because it should still be up here at the end of our line there, and then this one lets this be placed anywhere, which is generally kind of at the corner of where your drawing ends. And then this one just moves your dimension position up and down. So then I've also got a little block for the coverage position for the rear speaker. So that one goes here on our listening position there, and then this back grip just goes to your back wall, and then this is allowed to move freely and just displays the angle that will be needed for where that speaker is going to go. So we'll have to adjust that a little later when we have an actual speaker there and can put it on its pivot point. And then this grip, of course, just raises and lowers our dimension line again. So in practice, I generally kind of draw all of these and get everything laid out in one copy here, and then I'll take the inside of this, copy it to another section, and remove some of the dimensions or extra speakers so that things are readable. So we'll have a sample packet so you can see what things are typically in the packets that I've been producing. Alright, so those are all of the items that I'll put on a side view. The last thing would be a speaker tag, and that's just so that I've got consistent spacing below the speakers. And then I will do a layer match so that it is on the same layer as my speaker. The drawings I've been doing, all of those speaker layers here for, back surround left, the existing ones, back surround right, the height layer, speaker channels, the left surround, etc. Those are all mapped to actually export to the PDF in color so that they really stand out, because generally we're just adding those speakers into an existing auditorium. So I have those labels match those colors as well. So the area that is typically or at least has historically been an issue with figuring out the spacing is, where the heck do my height row go above these? And this distance here may be 8 feet off the floor. Is it always 12 feet? Is it always 15 feet? The answer is it isn't always anything. Not a fixed distance between the speakers. What it is a fixed angle between the speakers. So if I have our reference listening position here, I'm going to draw some extension lines across to that row of the auditorium. So I'll lay all of my elevations out, so that they have the same height, of course, as is typical. So this helps us identify which row we want to do here. And then I'm also going to pick up this speaker, if I can click on the speaker, so I've got the right layer here, and I'll do an extension line from it. Yeah, so the insert point of those is in the center. So I'll run one of those across, and I'm going to go ahead and run one up right now too, because I generally have one up from each speaker too, so that I can match some lines in a moment to place those height row speakers. So that helps us identify where these speakers are here, or the row that we're on, and where that side surround speaker is in our section towards the back. So again, thirds are important here, so I'll use my quick little third line macro here, and go down some, divide it into thirds, and move that line off of my nodes so that I can see them. So our set of surround separation blocks are based on some various things. So we've got the center line of our room here, and our row that is our 2/3 back from the screen. So if we drop this right here, that gives us our placement of this, and then we want to angle this so that it's pointing up here towards that surround speaker. So that's the extension line for the center of that surround, and it's coming through to this point on the wall. And most of the mounts generally articulate near the center. There, of course, is some fluctuation in that, and those minute amounts of fluctuation aren't a huge deal. So this will be close enough to describe our angles of separation, which is actually the important aspect. So we want to get a minimum of 15 degrees, and then I've got a mark here at 20 degrees, which is generally where we want to start moving things into the ceiling. 25 degrees is great, and 30, of course, is our ideal. So to continue describing this block, again, it's got a quick little set of offset spacers to drop on there, and those are all drawn on def point so they don't show up on the actual output, but it helps you line up dimensions across here. As you can see, my sample sheet has done that as well already. So there is some sort of flaw in how this block works. After you adjust this length here, which adjusts each of the links up there and where this vertical line is that helps you define the side of the auditorium, if you try to rotate this block again with this first grip, things get a little bizarre. So if that happens to you, just erase this one. The grips are all there. It's pretty easy to just drop it back in at that correct position and start over and step through it in order, and then everything works really nicely. So after you adjust the angle, you adjust where this wall is, and then we also want to adjust these because they are telling us the dimensions between where this angle of degree is going to intersect with the wall. So if we do this and then just going to do an intersection grip, and it turns into an apparent intersection because we're going to pick this line so you can see the little the dots after the X there, and then pick this line so it moves the end of that right up there to where our wall is, and that dimension is the number that we would hit at that angle. So then I pick up this grip and do the apparent intersection of those, etc., up through these. And that creates our set of dimensions for the various angles. Then I have it set up so that these print on a layer that's kind of grayed out so that the angle and set of dimensions of spacing that you're going to use really pop out in your drawing. So then there's finally a little drop down here that you can have it turn them all on, or just highlight a certain degrees and its associated spacing. And of course, you can certainly explode this and delete out any things that you don't want on your particular drawing. But of course, when you explode it, you lose the functionality of the grips. But as you saw, it's pretty easy to get this one set up and displaying the right things. So I can see from here that my normal target of trying to get 25 degrees puts it right up here, pretty close to the ceiling, and 20 is going to get it so that it's well below the ceiling, but probably not quite high enough. So I'm going to say that my 25 degrees is my separation that I would like to hit, which in the dimensions for this particular auditorium, puts it at 12 foot 7.5 inches above where our existing speakers are. So in order to describe that condition for our other speakers here, so we're on our third speaker here, I'm going to go ahead and pick up my height right surround layer and draw an extension line out here on my 25 degrees. So it's going to go here and make that horizontal out to here. So ideally that speaker would place right there. And which speakers did I place in here? Apparently I did some interesting ones, so I'm going to run this with the QSC speakers for the duration here. So drop this guy in here, and if I put it right on that ideal position, you can see that it's higher than the ceiling. So we're going to need to move that down, and let's take a look here. So we generally want to leave, 4 to 6 inches of clearance between the top of the speaker and the ceiling. So I will make a line here from the top of the ceiling, and I'm going to move that down. Let's move it down 6 inches today. So I want that. Yeah, we're going to go down 6 inches. So if I move this so that this high point up here is now perpendicular there. So that puts that spacing in there. But of course you can see these two speakers are actually lowered down already, and they are further from the ceiling, so there's a good chance that they'll fit. So if we copy this extension line and use the center of this speaker, which is also the midpoint of these extension lines, and copy it down to the center of this speaker and the center of this speaker, and drop those speakers on there again, we can see that they actually fit in the room quite nicely. So now we've got the beginnings of our height layer here. You'll find that a lot of clients don't want to go into the expense of mounting speakers into the ceiling, and they'll get placed here above these, keeping that 6-inch minimum clearance there. And how you would determine where those speakers go into the ceiling is you would move your surround angle measurements up to the row that correlates to that surround. So we'll go ahead and do that here for this back surround. I'm just going to make a quick copy of this extension line, and this surround actually sits here under at this row of seating. And rather than starting a whole new drawing for that particular surround, I'm just going to take this guy, move it up here. So also want to copy where this surround is. So we'll put that in the center of that one, and I'm going to hide some of these extra lines to avoid some confusion here for a moment. Alright, so now the lines going across we have are that row that we're interested in, and having the angle be an additional 20 degrees above where that speaker is, and a line telling us where that speaker is here on this page. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and move this back down to that other position, because, as I said, that block can be a little twitchy if we try to change its angles again. So I'm just going to hide it and grab a new one. So surround separation, excuse me. So the separation is the distance between the two rows of speakers. So we grab this and say this is our angle from our ear to that initial speaker, and then we run it to there, grab these, and that one went to nowhere. Let's undo that and bring it back. Here, parent intersection, there we go. So this is actually being a little bit more detailed than is necessary, or extending those out is more detailed than necessary. So the separation that we're looking for is a minimum of 15-20 degrees here. So you can see all of these angles actually place that speaker into the ceiling. So in order for it to not interfere with where our Voice of God or height top channel is going to be placed, which is basically the center third, if we were looking at the plan view and drew a tic-tac-toe board in the in the area between the screen and the rear wall and the side walls, the height top channels basically get placed in center square. So we don't want our height layer being too close to that. So our rule there is that we don't want it more than 1/6 of the width of the room in towards the room. So that would be, if these are thirds, we're looking at about half here. So extend that up. So we can use about that 20-degree mark. So if we were trying to continue that 25 degrees, we would start bumping into that 1/6. So basically you would figure out where that 1/6 is, find that line, and that's where you would drop that height surround speaker into the ceiling. But we'll do this our ultra simplified way, and we'll just copy these directly above our existing speakers. And how much width or how much gap does that give us? About 2.5 feet, which is very minimal. That's about the minimum that we'd ever recommend. But that is an alternate way that we'll sometimes let those drawings go out. So we've got our right surrounds here. Just to label one of these, this would be a height right surround. And I'll put that on its accompanying layer there. So we typically number our surrounds from the screen. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So moving on, as you can see, we've got our line here from our rear surround, and in my sample, and it's also often pretty typical, the back surrounds are at that same height off of the floor. So we can actually use that same line and go down here and grab our SR 1030 from the side, drop it at that intersection, and we'll grab our coverage position block here again, drop it right here in the center of this circle. So we want that pointed down 25 degrees, and conveniently I've got another little grip here, and we'll just drop it to there, and you can see that's rotated that speaker pointing down across the room, 2/3 out from the room to those listeners there. So that should give us a nice lobe of coverage over the whole auditorium. And then similarly, you'll want 20 degrees of separation for your height back surround speakers, and you can use that same block again and figure out where 20 degrees is. Looks like it's going to be a little tight here, so again the maximum is going to be 1/3. So if we're halfway between our thirds here, so we have our height back surround about here. And as you place all of those and drop them in on your floor plan as well, you'll see that sometimes where this one curves around and where this one would, the height back surround would also be directly above this speaker into the ceiling 1/6 of the way, those speakers may actually overlap each other, and one of them can be deleted and removed because they're covered, or because they're going to be playing the same channel anyway. So that brings us to the blocks that I'm actually kind of most proud of. Is I've got some little blocks here that I place on my rear my rear view section, and actually I need to unhide some of those lines going across there, so I know that I'm talking about our basically our third row here where our reference listening position is. So I drop this block in, and again, as always, this is helping us find our coverage position for these side surrounds, so it needs to be 2/3 away from the wall that you're aiming. So we're going to do a .x filter on this node, and we'll bring it up to the height of that same row. And then there's several grips on this guy. I'm going to go ahead and hide some of this stuff again so that we can see what we're working with. And actually I need some of those. We can hide our handful of these that are coming across. So this grip here lets you move it up and down, so you can do a copy and just drop it on the several rows. As you'll probably see in the example, towards the end I start just reduplicating that. There was supposed to be a way to do a drop down that picked some text and changed the labels. I couldn't ever quite get it to work, so I have a simplified dimension here so that as you move it up and down in increments of a foot. So now I change this to 3, and if I regen, so now you can see all of these labels update to say that we're working on the third set of speakers back from the screen. So that's just a convenience, so all of your labels are nicely done there. So you can see these are all floating out in the middle of nowhere. So how do we get them back in? We grab this, and this one allows us to place them against the wall, and the distance that wants to be is actually hitting our center line again, so which is the insert point of that surround separation block that we'd been using before. So now you can see all of these speakers are nicely placed up against the wall. And our next step is going to be to place the height of these, and there is a bit of a glitch in how the block stretching works, where the point is on those arc dimensions. As it stretches down, once it crosses over that lower line, it tries to put the dimension on the outside. So the easy workaround for that is to move it down to where it's just still inside, then grab that grip again, and then you can place that right there on that line to show this is where those speakers, how high those speakers are across there. And then for our one up here, I'm going to need to draw our line again here and move it down 6 inches, because that is, or actually that's the top of that one. So we'll just estimate it here. So if I had went ahead and drawn an extension line from this speaker back across, after we had given it that gap of 6 inches, we would have had a more detailed spot to put it there, but this will be close enough. Oh, and I deleted too much stuff. There we go. So the angle of these is also described on here. So this speaker is aiming down 9 degrees to hit our 2/3 across there. So again, the normal angle of this speaker has a 15-degree tilt to it, so the back side of the speaker is actually angled up slightly. And our height speaker wants to be down 27 degrees, so it is actually angled down quite a bit, and it also automatically rotates these speakers on the other side as well. The options on this one, so existing puts these lower speakers on the layer for existing. So if we go down to our speakers, so those are drawn on right surround existing, and if we select new, they'll just be on right surround, so that they're on different layers, and you can do some shading if you just wanted those to be half-toned or assigned a different color or something like that. So if we go to new, you'll see they brighten up a little bit, and then we've got those conditions again, and I did turn off all of those notes, so I've got things on notes here. So if we go back to here, so it puts some call outs to say we want to tilt it down. What does that say? 13 degrees on this one. Let's regen. There we go. Excellent. It was just a regen issue. So it says we want to tilt that down 9 degrees and tilt this one down 27 degrees. It also updates its text based on where this dimension line is. So if we said we were on row 5 in regen, now it says row 5. So those blocks there are quite useful, and that was always the most time-consuming part of getting speakers placed and trying to describe them accurately, so that particularly that downward angle of those high speakers, you can see that if the back of this speaker was placed on a bracket that was not adjustable, we'd lose quite a bit of angle to it, which makes it point well over everybody's head and makes it difficult to hear those channels. Finally, we'll drop some speakers in here for the screen. Let's see. So I've got some stage speakers, some stage speaker blocks. These are set up for the configuration we do at Cinemark, where they delete the height center channel. So I just drop this on the midpoint of the top of the screen here, and let's drop in some speakers for the existing. So if we're at the bottom of there and we want to make it point filter of the Y of here, and that one would be at the center of the screen, and change that out to our center screen, center, and make a copy, and do this side first so that we get it next to the edge of the screen here. And then I'll talk about how this block works. I've got a grip here which describes the spacing, and it's going to be difficult because it's on the wrong side. I was hoping to not have to do that. So, line from the center line of this, mirror it here over the screen, and copy another one here out to that far. So we could have just mirrored that whole block too, but the points of the speakers that are discernible for directivity are going to be the mids and the highs, so having this base cabinet on either side isn't a huge deal, but the essential part is wanting to make sure that the spacing of these across here is consistent. So this would be our left channel, L, left, and this would be our right channel. So this block works by taking this slider, and it's going to center them between the acoustic centers of these speakers, and then this one just helps us drop our dimension extension line down so that it points to say you're dividing between those speakers. In a typical configuration, we would have a full set of 3 speakers here, so we can just copy these and move them right up to the top of the screen and rework them as our height channels. So height center and height right. So that is a typical stage configuration with all 6 channels. And then you can dimension those accordingly. So that's how you get all of the speakers around the side walls of the room. The only speakers that we haven't covered yet are the overhead speakers. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this note layer off again, as it's a little busy with all of the notes from doing the site survey. Yeah. I'm going to turn them back on for just a moment, and wanted to make sure that it was seen that the reference listening position 1 has a call out on it, as well as our coverage position block. So those correspond to where these are here and here. So you're calling out those 2 positions in the auditorium. So now I can turn those off. The ideal location for our overhead speakers is going to be the 3rd lines, as I was saying here. So if we have some extension lines there and there, and then the number of speakers that you'll need to place will depend on the coverage and power of the speaker. Typical ceiling speaker used is this JBL here, and I'll place it here and copy it or assign it to my height top speaker layer here, and coverage here would probably, for a room this size, looks like at least 3. So we would have one at the other point of the thirds, and then at the midpoint between them. So that is the side view of that position, and our other view of that position is going to be the 3rd lines in the ceiling, front to back as well. So we can drop this in here again and put it on our height top layer. And the block change that I have on this guy is whether the brackets looks like it's at the side or at the front. So that little speaker, that'll kind of gives a visual clue that it is being run front to back there. So our U bracket for hanging it is twisted between the two. So in this auditorium we would have 6 speaker locations, and then of course reflect those onto your reflected ceiling plan, and then you can avoid any lighting or HVAC ducts. Typically we want to move those a little towards the center if they are interfering with other existing equipment. So that kind of leads into my default annotations here. So the only other things that we haven't covered here, I've got 2 blocks for 2 other speaker types that do all of the fancy orientating of these. They just use a different speaker. So standard annotations that I use is like here, where our 3rd speaker it is on the annotations, so this is going to be messy again. There we go. Hide some of the stuff so we can see. So the note says target separation is higher than wall will allow, maintain minimum clearance. So if we had done our dimension here based on this 12'7.5", so I'll typically put that on my frontmost speakers here and alter the text to say that that is our target separation. So that dimension is going to apply to the speaker as well, and I'll drop a quick one in here. It says 6" minimum, and that helps explain this note. So from this point on, we can't separate those speakers enough to have our degrees, our angle that we'd like, so we end up compressing them, but affording the client the less expense of not having to ceiling mount those, and can put them directly on the wall. The next note, sometimes you will get an elevation where the stage screen or the stage speakers are not adequately described, and I'll kind of guess at where they're placed. They're often placed so that the foot of that speaker is 1'8" below the center line. That's kind of an existing condition for a specific exhibitor, so hopefully with an accurate site survey you won't need a block or a note like that. And then also from time to time I won't get a reflected ceiling plan. So reflected ceiling plan not available. Attempt to place in line with side surrounds near the third lines, offset toward the center if required. So that particular exhibitor wanted to make sure that their ceiling speakers were in line explicitly with their side surrounds. And they also were continuing them all the way towards the back. So if you're designing for that exhibitor, you'll know those conditions. And in general, we want to move those a little closer to the center so that they don't interfere with the separation of the normal height layer. And typically you'll have aisles down each side of the seating area, so that moving them to the next ceiling grid over towards the walls is generally making them wider than we would like, and so that's just kind of a general statement. And then just had some other little semi-useful thing, notes. Like this is my riser profile at the center line section, so just a couple things there that I can share as well. So that is my tour of dropping all this together, and just due to how I was working, it always helped to kind of put all of it together and then make some copies and delete extraneous information so that it's easier to plot out, as you'll see in the sample PDF. Thank you for your time, and as always, you can get in touch with us if you have any questions regarding your design, or if your room is far more complicated, we're happy to help. If you've got balconies, or it's a smaller room with seating far off center, or any conditions like that, we're happy to help and get more Auro rooms installed. So I'll put together a package of all of these various blocks and use them as you will, and thank you for watching.